So I'd like to welcome Graham to today's podcast. Welcome, Graham. I'm so pleased to have you on today. Welcome, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here, Claire. Thank you.
So then, Graham, I first of all want to introduce Graham by explaining that I found Graham on TikTok. I was wanting to do some sort of cover for Mental Health Week, and Graham will explain his mental health story and what challenges he's gone through. But Graham also loves to work out at the gym. And I thought, you know what, let's get Graham on the podcast. It can motivate us all and share with us all why he feels that the gym is a great thing to go to, and how that has helped him too. So in this episode, I feel that we'll be touching on a lot around mental health and also that fitness piece too. And whenever we look at making changes, healthy, positive changes in our life, we need to look at those things that have helped people. We read about that in books and we see it in magazines all the time, but I feel that having those real heart-to-heart conversations allows us to really explore those things that have been difficult for people. And just to give people a bit of a disclaimer on this episode, we will be talking in terms of those deep mental health struggles. So what I'd like to talk about first of all, I feel, is just why you've decided to get into the gym and work out. I know that you enjoy that. I know that you spend time at the gym, but I also know that you do a lot of physical activity in your day job. So what is it for you that keeps you motivated to get you in that gym?
For me, my gym journey started a long time ago. I'm 52-year-old now, and started in the gym when I was roughly about 30. So I was a late starter, a late bloomer. And I'd started going to a local gym when I lived in Hartlepool. For years, I'd suffered with low moods. I was diagnosed with anxiety, stress, depression. And nothing would shift that. I started going to a gym in Hartlepool, a gym run by a former Mr. Universe, Eddie Elwood.
Right.
He's actually the first person to have won Mr. Universe 5 times in a row. Arnold Schwarzenegger won it 5 times,
Yeah,
but not consecutively.
wow.
And I started going to Eddie's gym and training there. And one thing led to another. I started to feel better about myself. And my anxiety and my depression started to wane. And I noticed a difference in myself. And I started to put a bit of size on, started to gain a bit of bulk. And I ended up competing in strength athletics, doing the strongman stuff.
All right.
Like what you see on the TV, Britain's Strongest Man.
Oh yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, I started doing all that. And believe it or not, I was only 12 stone. And I was competing against fellas who were like 18, 20 stone. And I started to shine. And I started to like outclass them. And that was a big ego boost. It was a big endorphin boost.
Yeah.
So I was getting all this dopamine, and it was helping clear my anxiety, help clear my mood. I was just being treated for anxiety, stress, depression, and none of the medications were working, and nobody knew why. And obviously it's because I needed the dopamine, and I was getting this from competing. And typical ADHD, I started to excel. I got to Britain's Strongest Man level, and I competed in the first 105 kilogram class in, I think that was 2004. And again, typical ADHD, done that, woke up one morning, thought, I'm bored with that now. Stopped going. And my mental health just plummeted again. I didn't realize the correlation between not training and my mental health plummeting. My psyche just didn't put all that together. And then it was later on when I thought I need to get back into the gym. I started getting back in the gym a few years later. Same thing. Getting the dopamine, the endorphins, feeling great. Anxiety waned, stress waned, depression was low, and everything was brilliant. A little bit further down the line, got bored with the gym, gave it up. Anxiety spikes, depression rises, stress through the roof. And that was sort of an ongoing cycle throughout my life.
And it's interesting that, because obviously to suffer with anxiety and depression and having struggled with my own mental health, when you find something, you're like, oh my goodness, this works, this is helping me, to recognize that, to feel that, and then to say, you know what, I'm bored of that. And I hear what you're saying, and I know that you've explained with the ADHD. What part of you in that moment felt that this feels so boring that I can't continue with it? Was it that at that time there was other distractions, or was it the monotony of that all? Because I know that going to the gym, I know that we talk about being in that right state of mind to go in the gym, and also not going to the gym when you feel motivated, because motivation can be, it can be fleeting, can't it? So was there something in your life around those times that was really distracting, that just totally pulled you away? Can you remember back to those times?
It was at a point in my life where my first marriage was coming to an end, and that was sort of distracting me. As I say, I was competing on a national level, and some of the people I was competing with or training with were actual world's strongest man competitors. And the person who actually runs the show now, Darren Sadler, I used to compete again. I competed against him and used to train with these guys. So ordinarily you'd think, keep going, keep going. But my psyche got to a point where it was eat, sleep, train, work, repeat. And that was my life. And I was even dreaming about training. And it just got to a point where I thought, I just want to be normal. I just want my own life back.
Yeah.
And as I said, the ADHD kicked in. There was no dopamine anymore. I'd defeated myself. And I just stopped going. And with that, coupled with the breakdown of my first marriage, again, everything just spiraled. And I started drinking really heavily about that time, which in turn affected my mental health.
So with you now drinking, so was this the second time that you then decided to reach for the alcohol to try and help you through with those difficult emotions?
Yes, it was like alcohol at that time was playing a big part of my life. And although I didn't feel I had an alcohol problem, it was. I thought, I don't wake up on a morning needing a drink. I don't find myself drinking through the day. I would drink on an evening. I would binge drink on a weekend. And that would be when all the problems started. I could quite easily go out on a Friday afternoon, come home on a Sunday tea time. And that's how it was affecting my life. And of course, that was having an effect on me failing marriage. It was having an effect on my daughters, a negative effect right the way through. But I was blinkered to that because I just couldn't see what the problem was.
No, and I think when it comes to binge drinking as well, when I'm working with clients that are binge drinkers, often it's that they associate that time as a social time. It's like the time that they can just be themselves, go out with their friends after work, and they associate that. I mean, I think back to like when I was at school, when I started working, or when I was going to college, and it was all that fun association with alcohol. You go to college, you study away, and you drink. And then I'd come back and some of my friends were still students, some of my friends would work, but we'd still all get together and go out for a drink, go to a club, and that's like your happy time, your happy place, isn't it? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people do sweep under the carpet the issue with alcohol simply because that social acceptance of that. And however, you know, alcohol, in my experience, can then lead to a lot of aggression. It can
Yeah.
lead to a lot of, in that moment when somebody is fueled with alcohol, it can have a really negative effect. I think some people can get like really docile and really friendly, and then, well, the only thing that I've really experienced is somebody having that opposite effect. My ex-partner was an alcoholic, and he would get very violent, very angry in those moments around that drink. So did you experience that either feeling really laid back, or did you experience that anger within?
I could quite easily switch from being a happy, laid back, drunk, life and soul of the party to boom, aggressive.
Yeah.
And some of that is part of the ADHD, the emotional dysregulation, where your brain just pattern matches, gets itself angry, you wind yourself up, you ruminate, and boom, that's it. Somebody says something wrong, you've took it the wrong way, your RSD kicks in, boom. And as I say, Claire, it was so easy for me to be like that. While I was drinking, or while I was trying to manage my drinking, my nana died. And sorry, it's just the emotion. You've seen it. You've seen me emotional. And I started drinking again, really, really heavily. And at this point, I needed to hurt. I wanted to hurt. I needed a reason why I was hurting, rather than accepting it was my nana's death. And I would drink myself into oblivion, and I would go out and I would actively look for trouble. I'd be in bars, and although I was a doorman myself, I would be looking for trouble with other doormen, just because I knew there was that chance that I'm going to get hurt here. I'm going to wake up tomorrow, there's going to be a reason why I'm hurting. And some people might struggle to understand that. But for me, for an ego-led male, rather than face the fact it was my feelings, I would rather, yeah, I'm upset, I'm hurting because I'm battered and bruised, rather than I'm an emotional wreck.
Yeah. And trying to process that difficult emotion. And the grief cycle, one of those things within the grief cycle is anger.
Yeah.
And often what can happen is that people kind of get stuck throughout that grief cycle from time to time. And it is a process of grief. You know, there is a process of going through those emotions.
Yeah.
Do you feel yourself in that moment that you felt kind of stuck in that anger? Is that all that you wanted in that moment, just to kind of express that anger, knowing that you'd lost your nan? And I know that when we spoke recently about it, you mentioned that your nan had cancer, and she'd asked you to take her out of the hospice, but you couldn't do that because she was in the final days. Was it that, you know what, this is BS, I feel this anger, and I'm going to try and use this in some way to manage my thoughts?
The anger, it consumed me. I had no control over that anger, even less when I was drinking. And around that time, I was mixing with people who would manipulate that anger, who would manipulate me into doing stuff for them, into being basically a tool for them. And because of the whole Again, I didn't realize I had ADHD at that time, but I was seeking acceptance. I was just wanting to fit in. I was going along with that. I felt as though I was with my crowd, even though the reality is I hated myself
Mm.
for that.
Yeah.
And that in turn, that frustration with myself in turn fueled the drinking.
Yes. So with that pattern, and like you said, with ADHD, we love the patterns with ADHD. With that pattern, how did you try to move away from that, or did you feel that that was your solution? What happened for you to move away from that pattern, and did anything happen to kind of like shake you awake to move
Yes,
away from that?
two things happened. I got into an altercation in a bar and somebody ended up in a coma, which I'm not proud of. And I ended up in a relationship with somebody whose ex-husband found out and he ended his life and blamed me.
Mm.
And I couldn't handle that. And that's when I knew I had to change. I was starting to have too much of a negative impact on everybody. I was having too much of a negative impact on me. And I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to be me.
Mm.
So I made a phone call to a mental health. It was Christmas Eve. I made a phone call to a mental health service and got no answer. I made a phone call to another helping service and got no answer. Bear in mind, it's Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And then I thought, who can I phone? So I phoned the police and explained to them how I was feeling. And they sent somebody round. And I thought, brilliant. So we're going to take you to get some help. So I thought, great stuff. They took me to the police station. As soon as I went in, they said, we're detaining you under the Mental Health Act. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, I've reached out for help here,
Mm.
and you're telling me I'm being detained, and everything just, I was drunk, and
Mm.
everything exploded. And it ended up where I was fighting with the police, actually in the police station.
Mm.
I ended up being stripped naked and put into a cell. And while I was in the cell, a police officer who I used to train with in the gym, he just came in and sat down and started talking to me. And basically just said, what's going on, Graham? And I opened up
Mm.
and I told him everything. And they call him Stephen. And he's a great friend of mine now. And I probably bore the life out of him because every time I see him, I tell him how he saved my life.
Oh, wonderful.
And he did. But he explained to me, look, this is what's going to happen. You either go to hospital and work your way through this, or you're going to get charged for all this fighting in the police station. You're going to go to jail for a long time.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, this is like the universe reaching out an olive branch.
Mm.
And I took it. And I went to hospital. While I was in hospital, I noticed other people who were in a worse situation than me. I noticed other people who really needed help. And I started to realize I'm just pissed off. I'm just angry. I'm just frustrated.
Mm.
And that was massive.
Yeah.
And when I was released from hospital, when I was discharged, I started looking into getting further help. I went to a local mental health charity, got some counselling there, and I signed up on a college course for counselling, and it all went from there. It just
Amazing.
one step after another. Completed one course, signed up for the next. Completed that one, signed up for the next. Before you knew it, I was at university studying to be a counsellor, but I was still drinking at the time. Again, still didn't know I had ADHD, and I wasn't going to the gym. So my emotions were up and down all over. It
Yeah.
was a proper roller coaster.
And I can't believe that in that moment when he says you want help, and I totally understand that the police were right in doing what they did, obviously detaining you because they thought you was going to commit suicide, and that is a process. And then having that light bulb moment, even after you'd been violent towards the police officers, they knew, obviously in that moment, they knew that you were struggling with your mental health and that you needed that help. And you talk about there about seeing those other people who were so much worse off than you, and having been in a hospital just like the one that you've been in, I've been seeing those people with psychosis
Yep.
been detained under the mental health that have been sectioned. It's a very sobering experience indeed, isn't it?
It is.
Extremely sobering. So you was then out of that, you was going through that process of receiving therapy, getting a benefit from that, requalifying as a counsellor, but you was then still drinking. At what thought process went through your mind to believe in those moments that actually drinking was something that you could continue with alongside this path of, I guess, reinventing yourself and making that new life, that new path for yourself?
I sort of had, in regards to the alcohol consumption, I had a blinkered view, and it's sort of a skewed view, what a lot of people have. And because I wasn't drinking copious amounts of lager or beer or spirits, I was drinking wine, but it wasn't problematic. It
Right.
was, to me, it was, well, I'm a couple of glasses of wine.
Mm.
What's the problem there? It's just a couple of glasses of wine. But what started off as a bottle of wine would then build itself up to being a box of wine, which equates to about 4 bottles.
Yeah.
And that is problematic. But it slowly builds up and you don't realise. And it is that, having worked in drug and alcohol, there is like a hierarchy, a perceived hierarchy, where the person who's drinking a bottle of Chateau Neuf de Pape looks down on the person who's drinking a bottle of White Lightning.
Mm.
They're looking at them and thinking, scumbags, what you drinking? Look what
Yeah.
they're consuming, the same amount of alcohol.
Absolutely. Yeah. Alcohol's alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sort of that blinkered vision. And that's what I got sucked into.
So with obviously that path, then it seems that it started out you wasn't drinking those amounts as such, and then you continue to increase that. And all this time you was not then going to the gym, is that right? So I understand
Yeah.
correctly, you was leaving that out of your next steps. Was there any part of you that wanted to do that, or did you just feel that, again, it's boring, it's monotonous, I don't want to get back into that, I've done that, I just want to leave it and just pushed it to one side? when did you feel, or at what point did you feel that actually you could start that back up again? And at what point did you feel that drive to go and walk back in that gym?
It was after university, and I sort of, it might sound, I was sat in the bath one day and I leaned forward to pick something up and I thought, I've got breasts.
Yeah.
And that's when I thought, I need to get into the gym.
Yeah.
I think I was about 16 and a half stone fat. And I thought, this is no good. And I actually got to a point where I'd started cycling to burn off fat. So I'd started cycling. I was cycling to work every day. I was doing something like, I think it was 12 mile to work and 12 mile back every day. And I started to get pains in my chest. And I thought, it's a cold, frosty morning. It's the cold air coming in, hitting me lungs. That's all it is. And I was sat talking to one of the doctors who I worked with. And he said to me, you need to get checked out. I said, what do you mean? I'm fit as a lock now. I'm exercising every day. I'm doing great, getting me dopamine. My alcohol use came down, but it was still there. And I felt great. Turned out I had angina. I needed stents fitting, which was all a result of the alcohol, the bad diet, and the lack of exercise. Because of the time that I'd spent not exercising until I'd started cycling again. Everything had just built up. My pipes were all clogged.
Bit of a shock.
Yeah.
Must have been a bit of a shock to the system from somebody being super healthy and then feeling that you're doing the right thing. I'm sure there's people listening to this podcast thinking, well, okay, I'm doing okay. I'm getting out. I'm doing the exercise. And I think one thing that we kind of underestimate is those years that we've had of overeating, of being, not as active. And I know that a lot of people now work from home, just like myself. We're not as active, not even like walking to the bus or walking around town because we're working in a city centre or whatever. We've got to be really mindful, haven't we, that our lives aren't literally so sedentary and we're not just glued in front of a computer screen. So with that piece of information, that bit of a shock, what happened after that point?
Well, as I said, the alcohol intake was still there. I tried changing my diet and nothing was working there. My cholesterol was still through the roof. It turns out I've got the body chemistry which creates cholesterol. No matter what I eat, I could be eating the total perfect low cholesterol diet. My body just creates it from nowhere. And there's so many people out there with this condition that they don't even know about. When I told my mum about it, she says, oh yeah, I've got that as well. It's like, well, don't you think this is something you should discuss with your children?
Yeah. Oh,
but it's something I would advise people to get checked out with their doctor, especially people in their late 40s, early 50s. Go and get the cholesterol checked out. I was still drinking. After I'd had the stents fitted, I started going back to the gym. And I was enjoying it. I was starting to get into shape. I was married at the time. I'd been remarried. And then I was getting all the comments of, why are you going to the gym? What are you doing this for? Who are you seeing at the gym? Like a really controlling type situation. So I thought, well, to save all that, I'll stop. So I stopped. And again, anxiety, everything else through the roof, depression, just totally affected my moods. And no matter what medication the doctors gave me, it wouldn't shift. And it was around that time that I lost my brother. Depression's up, anxiety's up, stress is up. I'd just started running my own business, found out like my brother had been murdered, and everything just exploded again inside me. I think at one point I actually sat and I drank a full bottle of Chivas Regal whiskey. I don't know how I survived it. I really don't, because it made me ill for almost a week afterwards. The effects of the alcohol. With my alcohol consumption, always came really low moods. It sort of magnified my anxiety, magnified my depression. It gave me suicidal ideation that I didn't even have, if that makes sense to you, Claire.
Yeah.
I had absolutely no plans to end my life, no plans to act on anything, but I had this little voice inside my head saying, if there was a switch where you could just turn it off now, just think how great that would be. If you could just cease to be right now, just think how calm and serene everything would be. Again, I didn't realize all of that was part of my ADHD. The inner dialogue, the low self-worth, all of that, what fits in. I think it was about a year or two after that, I was still drinking. A year or two after, I was at my best friend's wedding. I was the best man at his wedding. And me and him got in such a state that the very next day I woke up and I just said, that's it. I'm never drinking again. And I stopped.
Just like that?
Just like that.
Wow.
I don't know. It's not that easy for everybody.
No.
It certainly isn't. But I got to a point where I'd fallen out of love with it. It's probably, I can feel myself getting emotional. I would think it's the dopamine had gone from it. I wasn't getting that dopamine rush anymore. And again, with the ADHD, if you're not getting dopamine, what's the point?
Yeah.
So I just stopped. Yeah.
And I think it takes things like going to a wedding, a big event like that, to kind of put your life in order, doesn't it? And then you can start saying, well, okay, so they're happy and this is their life. What have I got in my life? It's a very sobering, you know, weddings and funerals. It can be very sobering, actually allowing you to kind of step back and look at, well, how your life is turning out. And when you can see and stand back and look at your life, then it can bring that sobering effect, which then can lead to really big changes. So you made this big change just to stop alcohol. I want to say to anybody that's listening to this, it's not advised for anybody that is a big drinker to stop. It can cause horrendous things like heart attacks. It can be really, really dangerous. In fact, when I'm working with clients with addiction, alcohol is the only thing that I work with when people can't just stop. It's not like cocaine, for example, totally different. With alcohol, it's not advised to stop. But having made that decision to stop, after having gone to the wedding and recognizing how bad you were in that moment, in those moments, you was using the alcohol to numb down the fact that your brother had been murdered. And just to go back a few steps, at that moment that you learned that your brother was murdered, how did you react in that moment? Was it literally just to go and take that bottle and to try and numb out on that information? Because I can't even begin to imagine. Hearing that news.
I didn't need to numb out, because when I heard that news, I laughed it off. My whole safety device inside of me, the clown, just laughed it off and sort of played it down. I was hurting, I was upset, but I never truly grieved. And I think that's why I probably was reaching for the bottle, why I was trying to find something in the alcohol, again, a
Mm.
reason to hurt, a reason to feel pain, because I wasn't feeling the grief that I felt people were expecting me to feel.
Mm.
But I was grieving to an extent. It was There was a lot going on at that time. There was a lot going on. But I find the alcohol was just an escape from it all then.